I appreciate Men Having Babies for giving us this opportunity as well. We have two speakers for you today and several team members here who are available to answer your questions. Our first speaker is the one and only, our CEO and Chief Medical Officer, who is Dr. Angie Beltzos. She has been practicing medicine in the Midwest region, primarily in Chicago, for several years. She's a board certified OBGYN and reproductive endocrinologist and infertility specialist. She'll be talking with you through the majority of the presentation. And we also have with us today as well, Julie Wiese, who is the director of VIOS Conception, which is our donor agency that we have as part of VIOS. And Julie is here with us today. She is an experienced infertility nurse, as well as extremely resourceful with FDA tissue guidelines for reproductive tissue donation, and has contributed to lots of programs and advisory groups regarding the topics of third-party reproduction. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to these two speakers, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. We'll look forward to your questions at the end. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, for taking time out of this beautiful Friday, and hope you're getting ready for a nice weekend. But we're so happy to take a chance on to speak with you today, September 11th, and I would say a moment to acknowledge that day for the US as well. Today we want to take a minute and just kind of review a little bit about the process of using a fertility clinic to help you have your baby. So next slide. One of the things I think that is so important, that is part of, you know, life, and Ron, who runs the organization, we were just talking a moment that they're getting ready for their trip for Men Having Babies, and, you know, reminding ourselves that what we do and why we do what we do is so important. Thinking about your clinic and the people that will work with you in this amazing step in your life to help you have a family includes a team that will have the vision to do so and use innovation, but also have an incredible team and very passionate about their work. And that is what we strive for at VIOS. Next slide. And our mission, of course, is to help you have your family with incredible success rates, but a really good experience. And we want to give you all the latest in scientific developments. And although a lot of people talk about that, I think it's a hard thing to deliver, and we really strive for that at VIOS. Next slide. We have a number of physicians and that are here to help you, along with our care providers. So it will be me and or one of our other physicians that will help you. Next slide. The important parts, of course, we can start with some of the basics that we're going to go over to understand your fertility, what you bring to the table from your family background, and then looking at finding the key ingredients to help you get to baby, the egg, the uterus, and the sperm together, and some of the logistics that go along with that, what programs we have that we can integrate seamlessly to help you in your journey. And also just sometimes one of the key questions is, you know, once we have the plan, is how much does it cost? And there are team members that will help you with that as well. Next slide. We have locations in the Midwest. There are offices in Milwaukee, Chicago, and St. Louis. And today, as we, even pre-COVID, of course, we've used telemedicine as part of the care that we deliver, but now that's become just routine from kindergartners to businessmen and medicine. So using Zoom, I think we all are getting quite used to that, but if your donor or surrogate is in any of these locations, they will be seeing us there. Otherwise, the egg retrieval and transfer occurs in Chicago. Next slide.
So I'd love to turn things over now to Julie Weesey to talk with us about the Egg Donor Agency EOS Conception.
Hi, it's a privilege to talk to you today. I'm really excited to tell you more about EOS. So who is EOS? We are a fresh meaning real-time donor, and a frozen egg bank. And we're exclusively work with VIOS Fertility Institute. And we bring the hope of a brand new day. And what the hope of a brand new day looks like is unique and personal to everybody. So here at EOS, we really strive to provide individualized, more concierge hand-holding to all of our couples seeking services using an egg donor. If you can click, Erin. So again, we inspire the hope of a healthy baby and dream of family. And our EOS care team staff, we have over 15 years of experience in governance of tissue donation, involvement in ethical organizations regarding egg donation in the industry, are members of the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, and have long-term professional relationships with reputable egg donor professionals nationwide and international. So we're really well-rounded, and we can provide comprehensive services for you when you're seeking treatment at VIOS. Next slide. So a couple things that we do differently. We know now in this ever-changing world, we recognize that it requires us to be mindful, transparent, and real with you, our client. And so we strive to always continuously push ourselves to provide services that are individualized to your needs, because every family is unique, and we understand that. And also that is forward thinking. And so we really offer you top quality, all-inclusive, fresh, real-time donors and frozen egg donor programs for you. We also offer an array of different, financing packages, as well as being aligned with VIOS's, in men having babies, GPAP-1 and GPAP-2 services. But we understand and recognize the complexities and the distinctions involved when searching for an egg donor. And so we're really here to help you with your best fit donor and access our entire donor agency pool. So we do things a little bit different than what you may see in the industry, but we really stand by your side with you and with your care provider at VIOS and team to help make your dream of baby using egg donor come true. Next slide. And so I like to call some things we do a little different our EOS Edge. And so we do have some essential services and client-focused plans, loyalty and advocacy to stand with you. EOS, a couple things, does not outsource our services and relationships. We have a rapport with all of our egg donors and our intended parents. So meaning we manage our own egg donor recruitment, our own egg donor screening, a very comprehensive vetting services listed here to provide you more authenticity and peace of mind of the donor that you select for your treatment. And this allows us to maintain egg vitality, which is really important, quality control, chain of custody, and personalized services for you. So these are some things that we do a little bit above what you'll see in the standard industry for using an egg donor. And a couple other things that we do as well, just to mention, we understand that it's our duty to provide you and to protect the donors that are provided to you, to protect and advocate best for the donor-conceived child's health, and for you to understand in this new world of genomics that we live in, potential risk in using a selective egg donor. So we do provide all of our intended parents a complimentary, no cost to you genetic match consult as well prior to utilizing one of our donors. Direct legal agreements between the parties is very important so that you have control over match specifications and security for your future family donation cycle. And we also offer other avenues which reach out to me, and we can talk in more detail in the future about advocating for the donor-conceived child's biological identity. So we're very forward-thinking in protecting all parties on this journey. And transparency is key, and trust in health and wellness of all parties through this process. So we're here to help you, and we look forward to that, and it would be a privilege to work with you.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. Next slide.
We'll hand things back to Dr. Beltzos and have you take us from here. Thank you.
So just briefly to kind of think about how this works, obviously we will need a healthy egg, a strong uterus, and fast swimming sperm. Next slide. And when we think about the egg, important medical part of choosing your egg donor, you'll want to know that she has strong, healthy eggs to give you. In order to do that, we can check her FSH. That checks the quality of her egg. So low FSH is actually a really good thing. And AMH becomes very important in how many eggs she might provide. If there are going to be 2 biodads and 2 sperm sources, a higher AMH can be particularly helpful for you. So you'd like your AMH in your donor to at least be 2 or 3 US numbers. And then the antral follicle count is another way of measuring her eggs, an egg reserve, and that's called in follicle count is seen in this little picture on the bottom. These black circles are where the eggs are, and that's a picture of the ovary. And the ovary is like a glass of champagne, and there are eggs, hundreds of eggs bubbling around, but the ones on the surface of the ovary are the eggs for this month. So if we think about your donor after you chose her, and there are a number of factors that go into that, let's pretend that it's the month she's going to do her egg retrieval and we see 15 eggs, 30 eggs. That can be a soft estimate about how many eggs she would give that month. So it can be quite informative to say, how many eggs do you think we'll get? Normally, you get around 20 eggs if the donor is collecting for you a fresh set of eggs. And depending on what her antral follicle count is for that month, it can tell you, hey, it looks like she's got about 30 eggs in the background today. So it's possible that she could give that many eggs. Again, soft predictor. Next slide. In regards to your surrogate, the gestational carrier, make sure that the uterus is shaped like a triangle inside. And so the baby will go, when you put your embryo in, it floats to the very top of the uterus and implants at the top. So you want to make sure that the uterus is beautiful, penthouse suite looks great. And we check the fallopian tubes too to make sure they're healthy. In regards to sperm, for you would give a sample of sperm and we would check how many sperm there are. It should be at least 20 million per minute. We see how fast they swim. That's called motility. And most sperm, about sperm samples, if you look at those, about 50% of the sperm is swimming fast. And finally is the shape of sperm. And if you're really strict about what we call the right shape or morphology, about 5% of sperm is right shape. Next slide. When you look at that slide, the left here is the normal shaped sperm, but sperm actually usually comes out kind of funny looking, and it can have all different sizes, shapes, 2 tails, 2 heads, too big of a head at the top. So all those are abnormally shaped. The one on the left is normal. And again, 5%, ironically, people are like, what, 95% are abnormal? Yep, that's how that works. It takes about 3 months to grow sperm. And after puberty, sperm are constantly being grown, and the ones that you see today are only 3 months old. At VIOS, we have, of course, the thing that male fertility and reproductive health is critically important. We also have a urologist that helps with your care, and we have a little deeper dive, not only to how many sperm are seen, but that's sort of a quantitative measurement, but also the quality of the sperm. So if you do this day fragmentation, that can be really insightful to optimize your care. So if you're getting you know, a look at semen analysis and talking to the fertility doctor, I think this is something that later on people bring up that can be particularly helpful. Next slide. And I know my audio is kind of coming in and out. Let me see if I can just to see if that helps. So let's see if that helps at all, and let me know if that helps. Now, in regards to questions, you can go, by the way, to your group chat there, and anything you want to talk or ask, you can just type in that box, and we'll have Q&A after as well. So people say, I'm going to give the sample of sperm for my baby. So this is the one. What can I do in preparation for that? And a lot of people tell you, oh, don't worry about it. It's fine enough. But actually, there are some important things. Fever can affect the quality of sperm. And so being thoughtful now, of course, we're all hyper vigilant about symptoms of COVID and fever, but fever can drop the sperm count. So if you do experience fever, make sure you take Tylenol. And the effect of that fever can hit the sperm today and even 3 months later. So you could have a physical insult now, and then the sperm quality drops 3 months further down. Another thing that they've studied is sleep. And we know that getting your rest, again, in preparation to give that special sperm, getting rest and a good 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours of sleep can impact quality of the DNA. And so, you know, if you're staying up late watching Netflix or up early with your conference calls, just be mindful to get your rest. No smoking. Smoking is can also affect your DNA. And we've seen that the toxins from marijuana, now that people are using marijuana more, that it can affect the sperm as well. Low T, people think, oh, low T is going to be something that might affect me, and maybe I'll take testosterone to make my sperm stronger, but it will have the opposite effect. So do not use any testosterone. It can make your sperm count go to 0. Environmental toxins and what they call endocrine disruptors. You may have heard a lot of talk about BPA, and everyone's getting these fancy water bottles like at Whole Foods where they're all made out of metal instead of plastic. The reason for some of this concern is that the plastic emits chemicals that mimic estrogen. And for guys, they can't have too much estrogen in their system, or they will start to have problems with their hormones, their testosterone, and their sperm. So try to avoid microwaving your spaghetti from last night in your Tupperware. Take it out of the Tupperware, put it in glass, because the heat will melt the plastic and emit that plastic into your food. VIOS also thinks that micronutrients are incredibly impactful to your DNA of the sperm. So people are like, well, are there any special vitamins I can take? The answer is yes, absolutely. CoQ10, CoQ10 are really helpful to make the DNA stronger in the sperm and make the DNA not break apart as easily as it can. Interestingly, if you look at sperm DNA is loosely packaged so that when it arrives into the egg can quickly unpackage it and fuse it to the DNA of the egg to make a new baby, a new person. And sometimes if the DNA breaks, which some DNA in sperm is quite fragile, you can have some problems with your embryo development. So look at that. We sell the vitamins. I found a great place in Canada that makes very high quality vitamins. You can buy them on our website at VIOS Fertility at shop, at the shop tab, or at least look at that and go to your favorite vitamin store and pick up some of those ingredients. Food is also a great source of micronutrients, and antioxidants are great for sperm. So I suggest for my patients who are getting ready to give that, again, special sperm sample, to juice 3 times a week with blueberry, kale, spinach, acai. Those antioxidants can be really great for your health and for your sperm. Another interesting area of research is the laptop computer, which now we're using more than ever. And of course, our phones are like oxygen. We sleep with them and cuddle with them more than we do our partner. And so those emit electricity, and there's some concern that it can be affecting sperm parameters. And they're looking at that in the US government's research. Next slide. So try to avoid that. So how does IVF work? Next slide. In vivo fertilization means the egg and sperm would be inside the body. In vitro fertilization means outside the body. So what happens here is that the donor will grow her eggs in those little cysts that we showed you. And as the eggs reach the right size, usually it takes the body about 2 weeks for the eggs to grow. Then we'll take the eggs out, which is called an egg retrieval. So we retrieve the eggs or collect them, and then we put them with sperm. And we put the sperm directly in the egg, which is called ICSI, and allow the little baby embryo to grow for about 1 week. Once it reaches the right size, we typically will freeze the embryo at that stage. One of the options, and a lot of guys are interested in pre-implantation genetic testing. That's where you can check the baby embryo to be sure it's healthy. It's like a DNA fingerprint of the embryo to make sure it doesn't have the tendency towards miscarriage. It doesn't have something like Down syndrome. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then once we have your healthy embryo, we put it in the uterus, and 9 months later, voila, baby. So how do we go with forward with sperm? One of the first things you should do if you're going to do this is check your genetic carrier screening. Genetic carrier screening is where you see if you carry any that could affect your baby. So it's genetic carrier screening. It's a blood test, and that's going to help you pick the right genetic match for your donor. We're going to have you give a sample of sperm, and that sperm will be frozen, and that frozen sample of sperm will be used to help you have your baby. If you're using a surrogate, that you have to do a special blood test called FDA labs. It's where we check things like HIV, hepatitis, syphilis, the infectious disease panel, run on a special FDA machine laboratory. And then that sample will be frozen. If you have a partner, the question will come up of how much sperm will come from each person. So a lot of couples will say, well, we'll do 50-50. And then once you have your embryos, which embryo goes in first? Some men have a husband where one of the people is more interested in being the bio dad. Usually both would like to do that. And then the question is, do you transfer one embryo, which we recommend one at a time, or do you put one from each partner and put 2 in to the surrogate? Next slide. Embryo from you will be tested or can be tested. This is an optional test that's gotten very, very popular, and we call it pre-implantation. So here's a picture of your little embryo, and we take a little sample of cells, almost like imagine an orange where you sample the skin. the skin of the orange in this analogy is the placenta. So you're taking a little sample of the cells that will make the baby's placenta to understand if the baby embryo has the right amount of DNA from the egg donor and you. It is an interesting test, and you can also know if this would be a girl or a boy. So sometimes that's important to people or to a parent. And so, for example, let's say you biopsied your embryos. A few weeks later, you can know if they're healthy, and you can know girl versus boy. And then the embryo is frozen to keep it safe. So I think one of the questions, that has come up with some of our parents or intended parents that are waiting, they're like, could COVID, if I'm going to do this, affect my sperm? I'm going to give a sperm sample, but what if they had COVID and while I get that sample, maybe an asymptomatic carrier? They studied, there was an interesting study of about 25 men who were infected with COVID. They actively had it, and they gave a sample of sperm, and none of the men had the virus in their sperm. So it got filtered by the testes, and it didn't let the virus get to their sperm. We also have not seen it in the egg cell. So for example, let's say our donor had COVID and we didn't know it. Could it affect the egg and then affect the baby somehow? So that does not been shown to be a way that COVID is transmitted. It's transmitted through the face. Most COVID goes through your nose to infect you. Sometimes it can go through your mouth, and occasionally it can go through your eyes. So it's the face where people catch COVID. So while your donor and while your surrogate are going through treatment, we strongly recommend that they wear a mask. You don't want your mask to be down here because that leaves the nose exposed, and we all see people running around with their nose out. Cover the nose and also shield the eyes. So we ask, like, once she is pregnant, for example, it's super important, as always, that the world is doing 6 feet of distancing, being thoughtful. If you're around, it's simple. If you're around someone who you don't live with, then wear the mask and the face, even with people that just are friends or family. Placenta seems to filter the virus. So let's say a surrogate got COVID while they're pregnant with your baby. The baby does not seem to get COVID from the surrogate. The babies that have been born are not infected from the surrogate who has it. In the first trimester, if someone got COVID, it could cause a fever. And fever can cause problems with the baby. It could cause miscarriage. In the second and third trimester, if someone caught COVID, it does put them at higher chance of preeclampsia and preterm delivery. And that's the last thing we want, is the baby to be born early. The babies are meant to be in the uterus for 9 months, and babies born early aren't ready. They don't know how to breathe yet. They don't know how to swallow. So the chance of ending in the neonatal intensive care unit is much higher. So we want the surrogate, as always, to be healthy, but thoughtful about that. And COVID testing is done before the egg donor starts her medicine and before the surrogate or carrier starts her medicine. But it's only so good, so valid. So we want to be minding everyone, including you, to be thoughtful before you give your sample that you don't have a fever. Next slide. We have some questions about how likely is it to work. We have excellent pregnancy rates for people using an egg donor, and this slide is relevant just because we want to think about, should I do PGT or not? PGT, even in young donors, can identify which embryos are the best to transfer. And so some people remember that this genetic testing of your embryo that I described earlier, the biopsy of the outer layer, is fairly accurate. It's about 90% accurate. It does also figure out which embryos are the healthiest, 90% accuracy. Next slide. In our 2019 year, we have an 89% pregnancy rate of donor embryos that were PGT tested and placed into a surrogate. Next slide. So the embryo transfer, the surrogate would give shown to mimic the natural cycle, and we drop the little rascal off into the uterus. We recommend one embryo for transfer, and this is very important because humans their uterus is designed for one baby at a time, and if you put two and get twins, it's two for the price of one, so to speak, but it also is much higher risk for the surrogate while she's pregnant and could deliver early. Next slide. When we put the embryo in, we drop the little embryo off into the uterus with a tiny straw, which is called a catheter. And that day and the next day, the surrogate would go home and rest. Embryos that are frozen have a great chance. People are like, well, if it's frozen, how likely is it to survive being frozen? 95, 98% chance that it would survive. It thaws, and then we place it into the uterus. Next slide. So this is one of the most important take-home points I would say for today, is that let's pretend that your egg donor on the ultrasound had about 12 follicles on the ultrasound. How many eggs would we get? Usually we can get most of those. So let's pretend we got 10 good eggs. 70% of eggs will fertilize, half of those will grow, and some are normal. So typically, for the human biology, that if you got, for every 10 eggs you get, you usually will get a couple of embryos, 2 to 4 embryos typically that are good. Next slide. When the surrogate is pregnant, we'll watch her closely. She's going to stay on those hormones, the estrogen and progesterone, for about a month until the placenta forms, and then she graduates from my care and goes back to her OBGYN for her care, where she delivered typically her babies, who will take over her care. Next slide. When we talk about if you're living in another country, we want to be just thoughtful about how that looks for your sperm collection, as well as when you come back to pick up the baby. And sometimes there is quarantining that would be involved, and we'll update you as your personal story goes forward. And we talked about testing for COVID on the egg donor and the carrier. Next slide. The cost of this, you've got your piece where the uterus and the gestational carrier live. The agency that's helping you with that will help explain that cost. And then our team members will give you the information on doing your treatment with us. We'll do your evaluation, the FDA labs. Then we'll create the embryo with your egg donor and PGT cost, and transferring that embryo into the carrier, and then the early pregnancy. So these costs in the middle are the things that we'll also focus on. And if we're helping you at the level of VIOS with your egg donor, that'll will give you information on that as well. And we have really nice packages that create some simplicity and transparency about the different pieces of these 3 costs. Next slide. So I think the biggest thing is people say, where do I start? I would say one of the first things you want to do is check the blood test for genetic carrier screening. Do that you can come in and have that blood test done, and a semen analysis to check your sperm, make sure that there is sperm and that it's healthy. If we need to do anything to optimize the health of your sperm, let's do it now. Third is doing some of the blood test. You do an initial screening of HIV, hepatitis, syphilis, and then we'll go forward and do another set of blood tests and sperm freeze. And once your embryo is frozen, we then find the perfect person to carry the baby. Next slide. We have a number of people on the call today that are also here to help answer questions, but we've got definitely a team around to support you through every step of this and to give you clarity on where to go. We have liaisons that are here to help, and if by chance English is not your strong suit, we do have people that can help with language support and translation at VIOS as well. And with your donor and your surrogate, EOS and our third party will be here to help you. Next slide. So with that, what we can do is set up your appointment to have a personal conversation and really kind of dive deeper. No matter where you go and what you do, we can help you with that those initial steps and just help guide you. So you can go to our website and get an appointment through that and or call. So look forward to meeting you personally. What questions does anyone have or comments from our team?
Thank you, Dr. Beltzos. This is Erin McDaniel again. So I would invite our VIOS team members who are here and available for answering questions to pop up with your videos just so everyone can see you. And then those of you who are watching today, please go ahead and ask your questions. Again, you can open up your video and just ask directly, or if you have something that you'd like to put into the chat, we're happy to take questions that way.
So while we're people are thinking about maybe questions, can you explain if Julie, if someone might have a donor picked out, how you'll help them?
Sure. So if you have a donor selected, we'll help you navigate reviewing that donor's medical, psychological, genetic history with your physician and all the experts, the resources that we can provide to you. We'll help and provide you legal counsel so that you understand more comprehensively, what you would like to put in and how you want to structure this donation. So we will really stand with you and help you navigate through all of that until your donor you're ready to move forward with her for donation. And here at EOS, we use healthy young donors. So they are all completely what we call medically, psychologically, genetically vetted for you. So that is, it's kind of a fast track to moving forward and for the IVF cycle and creating your embryos for future
Awesome.
implantation to your surrogate.
Yeah, and we have, some people have an agency, so it really is seamless. If you want to use and have help with your selection or help find a donor, we are here to help you do that. If you've already found someone, we'll make sure that they're the right fit for you. And Julie and as well as Lindsay's team will be able to navigate that with you. People ask, like, how many times do I actually have to come to Chicago? We usually say one visit where you, if you're from out of town, you'll come to Chicago and give the sample of sperm that will be frozen for the creation of your embryos. If you are in another state or in another country, we'll help you arrange to have a semen analysis done locally with your initial blood work. And we do all of our calls, and we've been doing it since we started VIOS with teleconferencing like we're doing now. So that part we're very used to, as you probably now are too, for your visits. Interestingly, also, people say, well, can I come and be there when we do the transfer? The answer is yes. We limit some of our embryo transfer participants who comes in the room. And for you and your gestational carrier, if you want to be there when we do the transfer, you can. And if that doesn't work out, we can also either videotape the conference or videotape the procedure, or you can be on a video conference like Zoom while we do it and be there with us.
A question. May I ask a question?
Yeah, that would be lovely.
In the beginning, Angeline, you mentioned something about a genetic match consult between me and the egg donor. What does that look like? Like the genetic match consult? What does
Great
that look like?
question. Yeah. So what you want to do before you commit to using an egg donor is a blood test. It also could be a buccal swab where you swab your cheek with like a cotton swab, or you can do it with a blood test. And what that test is going to look at is to see if you carry anything from your parents that could affect your baby called a recessive trait. And so recessive traits are conditions where, let's pretend I carry something like cystic fibrosis that for me, because I only carry one copy, it wouldn't bother me at all. But if the donor also carried that and you carried something similar, the baby could catch it. So we want to be sure that if that were to occur, we wouldn't want to use that donor because the baby could be born with a serious illness. So it's a simple blood test. And we would, and a lot of, we have parents and grandparents, many generations of DNA that we carry, and you wouldn't know it. So a lot of people say, well, there's nothing in my family. Usually there is no family history, even though we carry that gene. So we would check you. And if you carry something, you want to make sure your donor does not. And if the donor carries something, you want to make sure you do not. So you got to crisscross the information. And I've had people put, let's say buy frozen eggs, or they may have committed financially to a donor, and sure enough, it's non-refundable. They've paid some money and the donor's not a good match for them. So just do that on the very front end. That's one of the first things to do. But that's a great question. And when we talk about genetic testing, people confuse genetic carrier screening, if you carry anything from your parents, and then genetic testing is of the embryo to see if the embryo has the right amount of DNA from the egg and the sperm. So they're two different things.
A few more, is that okay?
I would love it.
And then in that same, or somewhere around there, you mentioned future biological testing. Do you mean you get to see what the baby would look like, or what did that mean? You mentioned something about future.
So pre-implantation genetic testing is something that you can do on your embryo. And the embryo gets 23 pieces of DNA from you called chromosomes. They're little containers of DNA. So you give 23, the egg gives 23 to make 46. If there is extra DNA from the egg or sperm or missing DNA, then that pregnancy will not be normal. So that can be tested. The last two chromosomes, the last two is the sex chromosome. XX would make female, XY would make male. So
Okay, that's a good one. I thought like you get to see what your baby would look like or something when you said future.
I'm sure that's not far away.
Yeah, that would be cool.
And then there was a mention about only 5% of sperm, unless I misunderstood, sorry, I was like writing and trying to get out. 5% would be only viable. So how do you, so then do we take those kind of precautions to increase the viability of it? Like you suggested, antioxidants, juice, blending, all that? Or is there any other, just that stuff?
Those things are really important. If the sperm is not healthy, then those eggs may not fertilize. Or if they do fertilize, nature is weeding out abnormalities also. But even sperm that has a funny shape can result in a healthy baby. So it's not that it's a deal breaker, that it absolutely is abnormal. But these are things that we want to optimize and not take for granted that everything's the same and that there isn't any issue there. But most of the time, if that sperm had something wrong with it, most of the time nature is also helping to sort out. So embryos from a bad sperm typically will not implant. And if they do implant and something's wrong from a bad sperm, they typically miscarry. And then once you are pregnant and you can check your baby by doing blood tests, ultrasounds. There are other ways to be sure baby's healthy.
And how long before you have to give your sperm, should you start on the CoQ10 vitamin?
Well, it's a great question. Even if you start it now, let's say you're going to give your sample in a month, it still can impact the sperm. So I would say its peak impact is when you do for 3 to 6 months. That gets you to that point where you're affecting all the sperm that you'll see. But you don't necessarily have to wait that period of time fully. And you can, again, pick that up. It's great for the brain. It's great for the heart, for muscles, and it's really good for sperm.
So all around helps.
Yep.
And then, sorry, if there are other questions, I can quiet. Can I ask a few more?
Let's do it. Yeah. And if anyone else, they can turn on their video and or type. We have still some time.
I don't like typing. I'm like, I'd rather just.
No, yeah, you talk. You keep going. I like it.
Oh, okay. After you freeze the embryo, what's the time lapse from freezing the embryo before it gets implanted in the surrogate? Like you said, you would. Is it a few? Is it a week?
So let's pretend that our donor was coming through. We created embryos. I like your sweatshirt. Cute. Oh, there's another Mickey Mouse underneath. Oh, how cute are you?
It's a Disney and Lucille Ball household. That's all my paraphernalia that I have. See?
You are so cute. I love it. Let's see that. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
This baby is going to have so much fun. Daddy is going to be like all over it. You're going to be such a blast at Disney World. I want to come with.
Oh yeah, you should. We'll go.
So I think your question about how long, so that once you have your embryo, let's say we did the retrieval today and the embryos are growing this week, you have 3 choices. The first choice is to have your surrogate ready to go in the wings. And as soon as the baby embryo is ready, we take the embryo and put it in the surrogate. That we call a fresh embryo transfer. It's not, the embryo has not been tested at all for genetic health, but it's placed in the surrogate. Most of the time, and especially these days, for a variety of reasons, 2 in particular, most people do not do a fresh embryo transfer. One is because a lot of guys want to do genetic testing, PGT, and it takes a few weeks to get the results, and it's mandatory freeze-all. Another thing that has developed over the years that has allowed us to really lean on freezing embryos is something called vitrification. And vitrification is fast freezing of an embryo. And the ability of that embryo to survive being frozen is so dramatically different than where we were years ago. So we basically freeze almost always. So, but that used to be the way to do a fresh transfer. The second is just freeze all the embryos and then go find your surrogate. It takes a while to find a surrogate. So sometimes it's a few months, sometimes it's longer. And so that way this step is done and the embryos are safe. The third is if you are doing PGT, it is, you have to freeze to give time to get the test results.
Okay.
But the embryo is ready in about 5 up to 7 days, and then it's tested and frozen, or just frozen.
Thank you. I can't read I can't read my writing, but I have a question mark next to it. The skin of the orange. Oh, when you were using the orange, like the skin of the orange gives like an example of you can figure out the sex of the baby and any potential things that may come up. Is there any risks with that? Like,
Great question.
You
So
shouldn't
people,
do that?
people ask if doing the biopsy could hurt the baby embryo, as long as the embryo blossoms. And remember, the embryo is growing and it will blossom almost like a flower and open up. And that, or if you use the analogy of the orange, by just sampling a few little pinch of cells on the surface, it won't hurt the embryo, as long as the embryo is big enough. When embryos are smaller, then it can hurt the embryo. And that's why we want to wait about 5 to 7 days before we biopsy any of your embryos.
Cool, thank you.
My pleasure. Any other questions? You good? Sarah, we appreciate this opportunity to hang out together today.
Yeah, thank you guys for your expertise, your time, your knowledge. This video is being recorded and it will become part of your profile. So if anybody has questions after we stop the call, I know the VIOS team will make themselves available to you. They've got a slide up right there how you can contact them, or always through the MHB's website. Thank you guys for your time today. And thank everybody who joined us for attending as well.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Harut, for being part of our Q&A.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry if I asked too
Oh,
many.
are you kidding? It's lovely. Thank you.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
You too. Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Sarah. And thanks,
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day. Erin, you rock.
Bye, all.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.